Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a case file that literally defies logic, physics, and, well, pretty much everything we know about how time is supposed to work. I want you to picture this. An abandoned railway station in the dead of night. It's perfectly, eerily quiet, right up until exactly 12:07 a.m., because that is the exact minute a train appears at this desolate platform, every single night. But here's the catch. This isn't some late-night commuter train making a delayed stop. When you look closely, you realize there's no one on board, zero passengers, no driver in the cabin. It is, for all intents and purposes, a massive mechanical phantom. We're going to look strictly at the source records and eyewitness accounts of what's known as the 1207 Express. So, what's actually happening at the station? Let's find out. Okay, let's dive into this impossible timeline. The number 46 is absolutely central to understanding this mystery, because, according to the official railway records we've analyzed, this specific train, like the exact model and engine number that shows up at 12:07 a.m., it doesn't actually exist anymore. In fact, it was completely destroyed exactly 46 years ago. It didn't just, break down or get retired to some scrapyard somewhere. The records confirm it was permanently lost in a catastrophic event almost half a century ago. And yet, like clockwork, ironically making it the most punctual train in the whole region, the metal and glass of this destroyed machine somehow materialize on the tracks every single night. Crazy, right? To really grasp how bizarre this whole thing is, we have to look at the physical environment of the station itself. 1978, that's the year this station was officially abandoned. Since 1978, no scheduled trains have stopped here. The infrastructure, just left to rot. The tracks themselves are heavily damaged, completely warped by decades of weather and neglect. Plus, the entire signal system, the electronic lifeblood that actually guides a train safely into a station, that was completely removed decades ago. By all laws of physics and basic railway engineering, a train simply cannot navigate these rails. And yet, local residents consistently report that the dead silence of this decaying station is broken every single night. To understand how this builds, we have to look at the sensory progression experienced by anyone brave enough or maybe foolish enough to stand near those tracks at midnight. The locals report a very specific three-step sequence as the phantom train approaches. Step 1 is the whistle. It echoes out from the absolute darkness, long before you can actually see anything. Step 2 is the vibration. Even with those broken tracks we just talked about, the ground beneath your feet begins to intensely rumble, signaling the approach of hundreds of tons of moving steel. And finally, step 3, the headlights. Twin beams of harsh light literally pierce the darkness, and the train slowly, impossibly appears from the void. It's a sequence that absolutely shouldn't be happening in a place that's been dead since 1978. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer strangeness of the phenomenon, because when the 1207 Express finally pulls up to the platform, witnesses report three glaring anomalies. First off, there is no destination displayed on the front or the sides of the train. It's not going anywhere on a map. Second, the windows are completely black. And I don't mean just dark because the lights are off. They're described as a deep, impenetrable black that literally absorbs the ambient light around it. And third, and honestly perhaps the most unsettling part, nobody ever actually sees it arrive from either direction down the tracks. You don't see it in the distance getting closer. Following the headlights, the train simply appears right in front of the station. For decades, this was just a spooky local legend. But eventually, someone decided to cross the line from observer to participant. One night, a security guard decided to conduct his own investigation. He went out to the abandoned platform, waited for the whistle, felt that vibration, and watched the headlights emerge from the dark. He watched this impossible train approach and stop right in front of him. But then, the legend took a terrifying turn. With a sharp hiss of compressed air, the doors of this phantom train actually opened. The guard looked inside and saw rows and rows of completely empty seats. Well, actually, scratch that. It wasn't entirely empty. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the specific date. The guard stepped closer and noticed that one of those empty seats contained a newspaper left behind by a passenger. And the newspaper was clearly dated October 14th, 1978. That is the exact date the original train was recorded as destroyed. The guard actually reached in and picked it up. On the front page was a detailed article reporting on a massive train accident. But as he read it, he noticed something absolutely terrifying about the photograph accompanying the article. The image printed in this decades-old paper showed the exact specific train that was currently idling on the tracks right in front of him. Compelled by a sort of morbid curiosity, the guard took a fateful step inside the carriage. Instantly, the doors closed shut behind him. According to his official account given to investigators later on, the train was no longer empty. He was suddenly surrounded by dozens of passengers. But something was horribly wrong with them. Every single person on board was completely motionless, just staring blankly straight ahead into the void. The silence was deafening. And then, one elderly man slowly broke his gaze, turned his head directly toward the guard, and whispered, "You're not supposed to be here." Right as those words hung in the air, the lights inside the train violently cut out. When the lights finally flickered back on, the guard found himself entirely alone again. The silent, staring passengers had vanished just as quickly as they'd appeared. But his relief was incredibly short-lived, because he suddenly realized the train was no longer moving. It had stopped at a station. But looking out through the glass, the guard saw a station that fundamentally shouldn't exist. There were no familiar landmarks, just this impossible, surreal platform. And hanging directly above the platform was a sign, bearing a message that completely shattered reality. It read, "Next stop, yesterday." The guard realized he was no longer just standing in an old train. He was entirely unmoored from time itself. Pure panic set in. The guard somehow managed to force the doors open and ran for his life, sprinting blindly away from the impossible station and eventually escaping back into reality just before sunrise. When he finally reached the authorities, he was terrified and exhausted, recounting this harrowing journey through time and space. Investigators immediately moved to verify his incredible story. They went to the abandoned station where his shift had begun, and they actually managed to recover the tapes from the old security cameras positioned around the perimeter. Which brings us to the ultimate question of our explainer today. What did those unblinking electronic eyes actually capture on the night of the guard's investigation? So the crucial point is the massive, chilling contradiction between these two accounts. Let's compare them. On one side, we had the guard's very vivid, detailed account. He watched the train arrive, he found the newspaper from 1978, he boarded a crowded train, spoke to a passenger, and was transported to an impossible station. But on the flip side, we have the stark reality of the camera footage. According to the tapes, the 1207 Express never arrived. The guard never boarded anything. The camera footage showed him simply standing, completely alone, on an empty, ruined platform in the middle of the night. Let's break down exactly what the camera recorded in those final, unsettling moments, because the timeline is where this goes from strange to deeply, deeply disturbing. At minute 0, the footage shows the guard standing normally on the edge of the ruined platform, just waiting. Then, from minute 1 to minute 16, the footage captures him actively engaging in a full physical interaction with thin air. He reaches out as if picking up a newspaper. He steps forward as if entering a door. He looks around wildly, seemingly interacting with invisible passengers, and even recoils in absolute fear. He is talking to nobody. And then, at exactly the 17-minute mark, right in the middle of a frame, the guard simply disappears. He literally vanishes from the camera's view without a single trace. The authorities officially kept the station closed, sealing it off from the public. But, as you can probably guess, iron gates can't stop a phantom. Locals will tell you that the myth endures, exactly as the source material describes. Every night, at 12:07 a.m., you can still hear the whistle pierce the darkness, then the vibration. And the most chilling part of the source reports is this final detail. Sometimes, if you're brave enough or foolish enough to stand close to the damaged tracks in the dark, you don't just hear the train. You can hear a solitary voice echoing from inside the invisible carriage, quietly asking you one question. Are you betting on? It really leaves us to wonder about the limits of our own perception, and a clash between the vivid memory of a terrified witness and the cold, hard reality of a camera lens. What exactly are we seeing when we look into the past? And what happens when the past looks back at us?